President Trump not too pleased by a federal judge's ruling temporarily blocking his immigration ban. On Twitter, blasting the, in his words, so-called judge's ruling out of Seattle that, at the moment, nullifies Trump's order.
The court has reviewed the motion.
The so-called judge, an actual judge appointed by President George W. Bush. The Department of Homeland Security complying with the order, saying it's suspending implementation of the ban, but adding that the Justice Department intends to file an emergency stay of the order at the earliest possible time. Several major airlines saying Saturday they would allow barred passengers from the 7 Muslim-majority countries and all refugees to board their flights. Trump promising the, quote, ridiculous ruling will be overturned. The Seattle judge also ruled that states have legal standing to sue. That could help Democratic attorneys general across the nation take on Trump in court on various other issues. The Seattle ruling comes after the State Department said nearly 60,000 U.S. entry visas have been revoked in a single week. On Saturday, the State Department reversing those cancellations in order to comply with the new ruling. Trump's travel ban issued a week ago forced detentions and chaos at airports and sparked angry protests around the world. Virtually all refugees were also barred, upending the lives of thousands of people who had spent years seeking asylum in the U.S. The government says 109 travelers originally detained at airports have been released, but plaintiff lawyers have insisted the number of people affected by Trump's order is far higher.
The suspect in an attack at Paris's Louvre Museum has been identified as an Egyptian national who had only been in the country a matter of days. The city's prosecutor says the 29-year-old obtained a tourist visa in Dubai and landed in France on the 26th of January. Security forces in Cairo identified him as Abdullah Rida al-Hamami. Police have already raided the man's rented Paris apartment. His father speaking to reporters on Saturday.
He called me. He usually calls us from a foreign line, which we answer. He told us that he was in France for work and that he would go home after.
Police have already raided the man's rented Paris apartment.
The investigations, which have just been initiated, are ongoing and will continue in France, but also outside France, in the name of cooperation on the international crime to determine the journey and also the motivations of the perpetrator and to find out whether he acted alone, spontaneously, or if he was following instructions.
French President François Hollande has described the incident as a terrorist attack. The assailant, wielding a machete in each hand, allegedly rushed at soldiers guarding the world-famous museum, yelling Allahu Akbar, God is greatest, in Arabic. After striking one soldier on the head, he was shot by another. Hamami remains in a serious condition. Authorities say cans of spray paint were found in his backpack, but no explosives. France was already under a state of emergency after a spate of deadly attacks that have killed 230 people in the past 2 years. The thwarted attack clouding Paris's official bid later on Friday to host the 2024 Olympic Games. Questions about France's ability to host a safe and secure Olympics raised. With the country less than 3 months from a presidential election, security and fears of terrorism will be among the key issues.
The resurgence of fighting in eastern Ukraine is threatening to undermine 2 years of efforts to pacify the region. That's according to Russia's foreign ministry on Friday, which has said Ukrainian forces are shelling civilians in their conflict against Russian-backed separatists, a violation of the Geneva Convention. Of course, Kiev places the spike in violence squarely on Moscow, the heaviest in months.
The shelling of residential areas and deaths of civilians, wounded journalists and deaths of Ukrainian servicemen lies with the Russian side and the fighters that it supports.
Shells from both sides have hit around this government-held town. Despite a ceasefire reached in 2015, the fighting has never fully stopped. Near one village, the combatants are said to be only 400 meters apart. European monitors seen here examining a crater from yet another munitions strike. They fear a humanitarian and ecological disaster is about to explode. Thousands have been left without power and water supplies cut. Even humanitarian aid to the estimated 18,000 living here is threatened in this deep winter. It's a conflict on Europe's doorstep, but on the other side of the world, eyes are on these two men, U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. This week, Trump's UN ambassador Nikki Haley telling the body sanctions placed on Russia during the Obama administration would stay in place unless Russia returns the Crimea Peninsula to Ukraine. Its annexation sparked the conflict.
More unsettling signals down under from the White House Friday. US immigration officials postponing interviews with asylum seekers in an Australian-run camp. Detainees saying interview dates on their applications were removed without warning on Saturday, hours after Trump signed his executive order. A low blow for those Reuters spoke to. Australian Bureau Chief Jane Wardell says they're desperate to know their fate.
The delay is quite devastating for refugees, many of whom have been on Manus Island or on Nauru for up to 4 or 5 years. They've been there a long time already, waiting to find out what will happen and where they can go, and this just extends that for them.
Earlier this week, the US announced it would apply so-called extreme vetting to more than 1,000 asylum seekers it agreed to resettle from Australia. However, an official source told Reuters the interviews were postponed over confusion around what the term actually means. It comes as Australia-US ties hit a new low over the president calling the swap deal dumb after a tense phone call with Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, hailed at home for now as the leader who stood up to Trump.
So at the moment there's quite a bit of positivity around him. However, in the longer term, he is much more likely to be the loser in this deal. If these people on Nauru and Manus are not transferred to the US, that leaves Mr Turnbull in a really difficult position because he's been very firm that they will not come to Australia, and he's struggling really to find another country who will take them.
On Friday, Fijian authorities deported an Iranian refugee after he fled Papua New Guinea, reportedly blaming safety fears. The man is one of those potentially eligible for resettlement to the US.
Any attack on the United States or on our allies will be defeated, and any use of nuclear weapons would be met with a response that would be effective and overwhelming. North Korea continues to launch missiles, develop its nuclear weapons program, and engage in threatening rhetoric and behavior.
François Fillon is not likely to get through to the runoff vote for the French presidency, according to a new election poll. The survey conducted by French pollsters BVA show a slide in ratings for the French Conservative presidential candidate after he became embroiled in a scandal involving salaries paid to his wife for work she may not have done. The news will come as a blow to the former Prime Minister, who had previously been seen as the frontrunner. And now it seems likely that the Conservatives will join their left-wing counterparts in most likely having no candidate in the final stages of the election. The chance of having a Democratic candidate in the runoffs has all but ended, chiefly due to the unpopularity of current President François Hollande. The poll gave Fillon between 18 and 20% of the vote in the April 23rd first round, behind far-right leader Marine Le Pen and independent centrist Emmanuel Macron. Le Pen, who heads the anti-immigrant National Front, is projected to lose to Macron in the May 7th knockout by 34% to his 66%. Another poll
So I've talked to venture capitalists, including Kate Mitchell, who's the founder of Scale Venture Partners. She is talking with her CEOs and co-founders of the startups she's invested in and really advising them, don't let your employees travel. Even if they're not from one of the 7 banned countries, just maybe not take the risk and don't let anyone travel. So Silicon Valley has for so long been the leader in technology innovation, and a lot of that is due to immigrant founders. And more than half of the unicorns are founded by immigrants. They're just a really important part of the ecosystem. So there's a lot of question now about our ability in Silicon Valley to be competitive if we can't hire the best people. And so there are larger economic and competitive questions here. There's been a lot of focus on the H-1B visa program, which will have dramatic implications to Silicon Valley if there are changes there. But what I learned is that this travel ban is already really affecting the small companies. These startups need to hire quickly. They need to produce quickly. They need to ramp up as quick as possible to meet investor expectations. And this travel ban has basically caused some businesses to come to a full stop.
Photo breaking social media records, becoming the most popular Instagram ever with over 8 million likes. Beyonce and her husband, hip-hop star and mogul Jay-Z, were married in 2008 and are parents to 5-year-old daughter Blue Ivy. The Crazy in Love singer, providing few details about her pregnancy, is a leading contender for this year's Grammy Awards on February 12th with 9 nominations for her 12-song visual album, Lemonade.
You're up to date. Check back later as stories develop.